This Saturday is, of course, the 12th of July, and preparations are being made for Orange Order marches across the north. Are these needlessly provocative displays or culturally important events that should be facilitated? Joining us now for a discussion on that are Eoin O'Brien, Sinn Féin councillor, and Reverend Brian Kennaway, a former senior Orangeman. Just to get your credentials, first of all, Brian, tell us your background in the Orange Order. Are you in it man and boy?
Well, I was brought up in what is commonly now referred to as Loyalist North Belfast, as the Crumlin Road. I joined the Orange Order when I was about 1964. I became a Presbyterian minister after that and served for 32 years in a congregation. I retired about 5 years ago, and I spent 3 years on the Parades Commission for Northern Ireland, trying to adjudicate on these difficult parades. But you were a upstanding lodge member in North Belfast. You went on parades every 12th of July.
Yes, how important was the 12th of July? What does it mean to you?
My earliest recollections of the 12th as a boy was to go out onto the Crumlin Road just from where I lived and to see a lodge coming down that road. The lodge, I know it well, it was Fernhill Temperance Lodge. They had maybe 120 members, all with black suits, dark suits, white gloves, bowler hats, and a bit of fern in them. And they were led by a very respectable band. And they walked down that road to meet up and start the main demonstration at Carlisle Circus. And they were kind of role models for people.
But in terms of, you know, Catholics go to Mass, Protestants go to service, was it of religious significance? Was the banner of significance and its place in the lodge, in the building?
Yes. For me, when I decided to join the Orange Order, prior to deciding it, I examined what it stood for and its ethos, and I agreed with it. I saw it as being, as they say themselves on their website, Christ-centred, Bible-based and church-grounded. And I agreed thoroughly with that. And I joined the lodge. And again, the banner, if I remember rightly, on it had religious symbols on it. The Good Shepherd or something, you know. And lots of banners have that, as well as William crossing the Boyne. So,
but is it a triumphalist display for the Battle of the Boyne?
I never saw it like that. I didn't see it like that, even in Belfast in those earlier days. I mean, for example, the conflict at the moment is passing St. Patrick's Chapel on Donegal Street. And my recollection in those early days was you walked down there, the bands stopped playing before they came to the chapel. They just did it. And then began playing afterwards. So
was there not a kind of jeering element to it? You know the way you have Glasgow Celtic and Glasgow Rangers. Was there an element of kind of, you know, down on the tags and all that?
Absolutely not. In fact, most of the taxi drivers in the parade in those days were Catholics. They got a good day's wages out of it.
Okay. You wrote a book. Tell us about the book.
I wrote a book in 2006, The Orange Order, A Tradition Betrayed. It was launched in my alma mater, Union Theological College in Belfast, in April. And then subsequently I did a second launch at the invitation of Féile an Phobla, the People's Festival in West Belfast.
And what was it, a historical analysis?
Well, it was, as one critical review of it said, technically only the first chapter is historical, but the rest was comment on crucial issues like the issue of parading and the religious ethos.
And what was the point
education.
You were making?
The point I was making, and I concluded with, was really the Orange Order is a tradition betrayed. I still agree with its tradition.
Betrayed by whom?
It was betrayed by the leadership and nothing else.
How so?
Because they just did not know how to give leadership. And
did they become politicised by the DUP? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think they've become more so now, even since 2006.
It's a symbol of a particular brand of unionism, is that what you're saying?
It's becoming increasingly so. It wasn't so much then in 2006. It was just the leadership hadn't a clue how to take them in a direction.
Just for the viewer, we're presenting you as someone who is a genuine Orange man, but a man who has a perspective that doesn't approve of everything that is being protested about. Would that be a fair comment?
Well, yes, but I also hold...
And, of course, a member of the Parades Commission,
yes,
which I'll come to later.
Yes, but I also hold, of course, that the views which I hold dear are the views of the majority of Orangemen.
Okay.
And because there's a huge difference...
Even David Trimble shares your views, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
OK, Eoin O'Brien, we know you as a Dublin councillor for Sinn Féin, but you spent 11 years in the Ardoyne area, which would be one of the flashpoint areas of conflict in North Belfast.
Sure. In fact, I lived in an area called the New Lodge, which wouldn't be far from where Broin is originally from some years ago. I was a Belfast City Councillor for the Old Park electoral area, which includes Ardoyne, it includes the New Lodge, Tigers Bay interface, it includes Liganeal. So in terms of the constituencies in the north, it probably has the largest number of interfaces, and probably even at that stage had the largest number of contentious parades. And of course, the Crumlin Road and Ardoyne is the one we're talking about this evening. I mean, from where I kind of look at it, the 12th of July is a hugely important event for Broin, for Orange men, and for the broad Protestant and Unionist community. I have no issue with that whatsoever. And in fact, in the first year I went to Belfast, I actually went down onto the Dublin Road and Royal Avenue as a spectator to see the 12th of July. No, and as somebody, I suppose, from the south, I kept my mouth very tightly shut at the time, but I wanted to see what it was about. The problem is that while there are now, over the course of the marching season, which is several months long, somewhere in the region of about 3,000 loyal institution parades. When I arrived in Belfast in 1995, there was about 2,000, so there's been a significant increase in them. The overwhelming majority of them are well organised, non-contentious, family days for people for whom those events are very important. But there is a small number that are very contentious, and the reason they're contentious is because the part of the routes that they pass through communities that aren't Protestant, Unionist or Loyalist. They're nationalist, they're Republican. But more than that, the experience of those nationalist communities, of the types of events that Broin has described, is very, very different from how the Orange participants in those events. So they see them, for example, as very jingoistic. They can see them as very intimidating. There can often be significant levels of violence surrounding them. They can be periods of great tension. I mean, I remember growing up as a young teenager in Dublin, we used to have families from different parts of the north who would actually come.
They get out to the north.
Move down, particularly during
families.
The marching season. So where we have these contentious parades, it's not about saying the 12th of July isn't important or not recognising the cultural validity of that event. It's saying where there are contentious parades, what you need to do is to get both the residents and the loyal institutions sitting down, and for however long it takes, no matter what the difficulties involved, engage in dialogue and try and resolve it. And where that has happened,
okay, well now let's bring us right up to date.
Could I just take issue with what you said, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
You talked about, and I think you're giving the viewers the impression that a number of parades walk through nationalist areas. Now, I would contend that's not the case. They walk in major arterial routes. They may be close to interfaces, and that is the problem.
You're saying it's the main road?
Yes.
Okay, well now let's move on to the flashpoint. Last year, the Parades Commission did not allow the return march in Liganeal in North Belfast. There were several days of rioting, violence and so on. This year the Parades Commission have reiterated the refusal of this. The ante has been upped all week. You've had Peter Robinson, Mike Nesbitt of the UUP coming together with the Orange institutions, really threatening a graduated response at council, assembly and governmental and Irish council, north-south body. It looks serious. What are we to make of this, and what should the British government do to diffuse it, in your opinion, Brian?
Well, I think the vast majority of the Unionist population are appalled by the behaviour of their own politicians. They can see it as upping the ante. They can see it as not being helpful to the present situation, calling for people to protest but do so peacefully. I mean, that is in many ways a contradiction. Once you call on people to protest, the immediate thing that comes to mind is get onto the streets, block the roads, and that becomes violent in the end. So I think it's grossly irresponsible.
Okay.
It's also important to remember when the Parades Commission refused the return leg of this parade last year, one of the things they did afterwards was they outlined what they felt was a kind of a roadmap to trying to resolve the problem, and they called for sustained and meaningful dialogue between the various parties to resolve it. In their determination this year round, they acknowledged, and I think they're correct in that there had been sporadic dialogue, but there hadn't been sustained and meaningful dialogue. The great tragedy is this, however, is in the first instance, this isn't what a British government should do. This is about what political leaders in Ireland, and particularly in the north of Ireland, should be doing, which is, where there is problems, you sit down and you talk about them. What have unionist political leaders done, both the DUP, the UUP and some of the other parties, not just today but last week? They've withdrawn from dialogue about trying to resolve very important issues such as legacy issues around the conflict. They've withdrawn and are now threatening to withdraw from a range of political institutions. Well, my view, I suppose, from the nationalist or Republican point of view, is it's a failure of political leadership. I mean, if you've got a problem, whether it's in your personal life or in politics, you engage, you talk and you try and resolve it. There hadn't been serious discussions between the residents and the loyal institutions in North Belfast leading up to this year's parade. That's why there isn't a parade. And it makes no sense for unionist politicians to then say, well, the response to this is to walk away. It sends the wrong signal to people on the ground. And I think it feeds into the worry that
what people in the south can't understand is we had this flashpoint in Garvaghey Road in Drumkey in 1998. Since then, we've had Belfast Agreement. Well, before that, we had the Belfast Agreement. 16 years later, how come it's Liganeal, Ardoyne area? What is it about that area that makes it the most critical flashpoint? You live in this area. Well, what is it?
Yeah, well, I don't live there now. Well, first of all, Drumkee's not resolved. It's still unresolved, and every Sunday there's a parade down from the church for 100 yards down to the bridge where a letter is handed over in protest to a police officer. That's every Sunday. North Belfast now, Ardoyne, for many years, for 30 years or more.
It sounds pretty pointless, that.
Well, yes, I think it is. But, I mean, this is how these people feel. They feel that this is an expression
and tell me
of their culture.
One of the things that Peter Robinson is looking for is a legal commission to oversee the work of the Parades Commission. Is the credibility of the Parades Commission as a respected institution? Brian, you've been a member of the Parades Commission, you're no longer a member.
Yes, but
is the Parades Commission a problem?
No, I would contend it's not. It's not that it's been tried and failed, it's the fact that it hasn't been tried at all. Officially, the Orange Order don't recognise the Parades Commission, and officially they won't talk. But unofficially, multitudes of Orangemen have come in, made representation of the Parades Commission. We have helped to resolve some issues, which of course we can't simply broadcast because they're very sensitive. So we've resolved a lot of difficulties. The Ardoyne issue is totally separate. And last year, the Parades Commission, of which I was part, laid it down very clearly. This is a roadmap. Here's what you need to do between now and next year. And they said you should start conversations by September 2013. And they went on to say, crucially, in the event of the loyal orders respecting this determination, and in the event of sustained and sincere dialogue, we expect that any future commission will look favourably upon a notification for a similar evening return parade on the 12th of July 2014. Now, what was the response to that? Well, it was a confrontation. It was the setting up of a...
Would Sinn Féin agree to a legal commission being set up to review the Parades Commission?
No, absolutely not. And
why not?
First of all, because it's a clear attempt by political unionism to undermine the Parades Commission. The reason there's a contentious parade isn't because of the Parades Commission, it's because of the failure of, in my view in particular, in this case, the loyal institutions and their community and political representatives to sit down and engage in the kind of dialogue that the Parades Commission recommended last year.
And you don't think in any way Sinn Féin has deliberately fomented and manipulated Catholic opinion against this as a real rallying point for Sinn Féin? And also I want to put to you, there's a suggestion that some of the dissident groups are actually upping the ante, and this is why Sinn Féin's so hardline about this.
I spent, as an elected representative in North Belfast, a huge amount of time, as my colleagues continue to do today, ensuring that during the summer months calm is maintained on the streets, and those very small elements within the nationalist community who would try and exploit this aren't able to do so. That's involved enormous amount of work and quite a lot of risk-taking by senior Republicans. What we want to see is this resolved. And the one thing I will say is this, is while some southern viewers might find this a little bit perplexing, there have been lots of successes. And where there have been successes, it's because sensible people on the Nationalist Republican side and on the unionist loyal institution side, engage, dialogue, compromise and resolve.
The final point I want to put to you is both of you. To what extent is this just one issue in terms of flags, emblems and other legacy issues? We saw the Haas proposals ran into the sand. What do both governments and the government in Northern Ireland need to do to deal with this complex residual set of issues? Brian?
Oh dear, we needed about 2 hours to discuss that, you know. It is so complex. I'm only concerned personally about the parading issue. That's the one that's to the fore at the moment. I think the Northern Ireland folks need to sit down. To be honest, I think British government should stay out of it, Irish government should stay out of it. This is something we have to deal with internally ourselves. And when people come to the table, they should know that when they come to the table to have a conversation, you don't go away with everything you asked for. You've got to compromise a bit. And that's what we need to do. Sit round the table, have a bit of compromise. But the difficulty is we've got long memories. And we can remember, of course, the time when Sinn Féin did stir it up and created a lot of resonance groups, over which some of them now, they've seemed to have lost control.
And leaving aside, of course, the campaign of violence. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is, where do we go now post-Haas?
Well, first of all, we need to go back to the negotiating table. I suppose from Sinn Féin's point of view, the really big gap, or the really big problem at the moment, is there's a lack of leadership within political unionism, whether it's locally on the parading issue or on the bigger issues of conflict resolution. And that's one of the reasons why more and more, for example, unionists aren't voting, particularly people who would have a more moderate or centre ground view, because they feel abandoned by the kind of the shift to the hard right among unionism. So we need to get back around the table, we need to engage in dialogue, and we need to resolve the issues. And we're not going to achieve that if we have unionist politicians, that we had Peter Robinson and Mike Nesbitt today, threatening to walk out of political institutions, to walk out of talks, and to heighten tensions on the streets through protests at the time when we actually need calm and we need dialogue. So on this, Brian and myself, I think, are in complete agreement. It's about political leadership on all sides. The one difference I have with Brian is the British government and the Irish government do have a role. They've taken their eye off the North over the last number of years, and that's part of the problem. They are co-guarantors of the Belfast Agreement. They have a responsibility in terms of assisting the parties in the North and on the island, and they need to live up to that responsibility. Unfortunately, been very lacking in that.
Yes, but you see, parading is inextricably linked to the Orange tradition, but parading is not essential to Orangeism. That is an absolutely crucial thing to remember. And I think folks in the Orange tradition have to recognise that afresh and maybe perhaps look at other ways to express their culture.
Reverend Brian Kennaway and Councillor Eoin O'Brien, thank you both for joining us, and we hope that the violence will be minimised. After the break, we'll be